Good afternoon, dear students. Uh, Today we'll continue from where we had left before about the effects of and evidences of global warming, most importantly climate change. Even the minimum and predicted shifts in climate for the 21st century are likely to be significant and disruptive. Predictions of future climate change are wide-ranging. The global temperature may climb from 1.4 to 5.8 degrees Celsius, like we discussed in the last class. The sea level may rise from 9 centimeters to 88 centimeters. 88 centimeters is almost nearly 3 feet plus. Now, you have to understand when the water level rises just by a few millimeters, when we get torrential rain or heavy downpour and the water level increases in the rain increases, uh, the rain count increases by just a number of millimeters, we expect and we undergo flooding. Now, over a century, when the water level will rise almost 3 feet in the ocean, you can imagine there will be a lot of small islands, a lot of coastal areas that will disappear from from the Earth's surface for good. If thus increasing in the sea level, this century are expected to range from significant to catastrophic. Um, like I said, in this, what we see these days is an increase of water level by a few millimeters, causing severe flooding. When we have an 88 centimeter increase in the coastal area or in the sea, thus increasing the sea level this century are expected. We are already going through severe weather pattern changes, weather anomalies, a lot of droughts, a lot of bushfires because of extra heat, extreme heat in the summer areas in the summer period. And then again, we are expecting heavy, severe cyclones and hurricanes, which is happening every year, a lot more frequent, a lot more um, severe than what we used to have before. And also, in all the places that we never used to experience any kind of flooding or severe cyclone or severe snowstorms in the past. Especially if you want to mention, there's a number of cyclones and hurricanes and extra rainfall that came up, weather patterns that drove up from the coastal area up into the mainland of America. And America, the United States of America, have experienced and undergone a number of severe cyclones and hurricanes in its coastal areas. Um, that's what they're saying. This centuries, the weather pattern changing and the change in the expectation of the number, the frequency, or the severity of the climatic anomalies are from significant to catastrophic. This uncertainty reflects the complexity, interrelatedness, and sensitivity of the natural system that makes up the climate. Because they're all interrelated. When there's a small change in temperature, there's a whole lot of change in the system because it's a complex system that depends that is driven by a number of variables, and all these variables work in a certain manner. And according to that, increasing in temperature, upsetting the variables are causing severe storms and flooding. The minimum warming forecast for the next 100 years is more than twice the 0.6 degrees increase that has occurred since 1900. In the last century or century before, as I said earlier, due to lack of industrialization, lack of dependency on fossil fuel, and a far more dependency on natural resources, people walking and using less electricity, using less cars, had predicted only a zero point 0.6 degrees Celsius increase. Whereas in this century, we are trying to stop our COP26 target was to, COP29 target was to address the 2 degrees or to keep the global warming temperatures rising below 2 degrees. It's far from 0.6 degrees as predicted in the previous century. Increase has occurred since 1900, and the earlier increase is already have been marked consequences. This 0.6 degrees increase has already given given us some consequences where we have seen some climatic anomalies where droughts happen in places where there never used to be, and extra rainfall is causing flooding in places where flooding never used to be. And extreme cyclones and hurricanes are devastating coastal areas in America. This year, especially in the last 2020, there have been a number of significant strong storms that caused havoc in the coastal areas of USA, in the southern coast of USA. Extreme weather events, as predicted by computer models, are striking more often and can be expected to intensify and become still more frequent. As I said, due to the increase that was happening in the last century, 0.6 degrees, and now almost coming up to 2 degrees in increase in the global temperature, we are expected that the severe storms or climatic disasters or calamities are going to only become still more frequent and intensify in strength. A future of more severe storms and floods along the world's increasingly crowded coastline is likely. Also, food shortage is a very important part that is directly related to global warming. Although regional and local effects may differ widely, a general reduction is expected in potential crop yields in most tropical and subtropical regions. You see, because of the tropical and subtropical regions, you tend to undergo the when there's a weather change, weather pattern change, is the tropical and subtropical regions that undergo the displays or that undertakes the most amount of the variation. Mid-continental areas such as the United States, grain belt, and the vast areas of Asia are likely to become dry. Like I said, in the coastal and in the tropical and subtropical area, and also in the mid-continental areas like United States, there is a grain belt, the belt where a lot of food grains are grown in vast areas. Also, a lot of food grains are grown in vast areas in Asia, which both of them are likely to become dry. Sub-Saharan Africa, where dry land agriculture relies solely on rain, the yield would decrease dramatically even with minimum increase in temperature. In the Sub-Saharan African deserts, or African, not desert, and Sub-Saharan African areas, regions, the agriculture solely depends on rain because there's no waterlogged, landlocked water facilities or water reservoirs or water lakes or any kind of freshwater supply in those areas apart from the rain. And now when the global temperature is increasing and the weather pattern is shifting, and in the sub-Saharan area there's obviously a lack of rain as it is already, now it's only going to get more severe, and there is a good risk of running into drought. Such changes could cause disruption in food supply in a world is already afflicted with food shortages and famines. Dwindling freshwater supply. Again, there's also another problem of freshwater supply decreasing. Saltwater intrusion from rising sea level. When the seawater is going to rise and flooding will take place, and not only flooding, also the seawater effects into the underground water reservoirs, which are going to, due to the rising sea levels, will reduce the quality and quantity of freshwater supplies. This is a major concern, since billions of people on Earth already lack access to fresh water. Higher ocean levels already are contaminating underground water sources in many parts of the world. For example, I stay in a region of Kumilla in Bangladesh, um, south from Dhaka city, where different parts have different kind of water at different levels, different depths. Few days ago, I installed a deep tube well. So naturally, we go up to 250, 200 feet below, we get fresh water. But now, because there's a risk of getting arsenic, we try to tend to go a little bit lower down. But as soon as we go lower down, the water starts getting salty. Now, there's two reasons because of that. One is the rising water level, salt water level around the coastal area of Bangladesh, the Bay of Bengal, is slowly seeping into our uh, water pockets, that is the freshwater pockets that are in underground or reservoirs. Another possibility or another reason for the water to be salty is because of the high gas content under the water under the surface of in the region of Kumilla, where particularly I installed the deep tube well. Also, if you think about it, freshwater our freshwater source is only the rain, and if the global temperature starts rising, we'll have a lot more evaporation from the surface, ocean surface, and there's a lot more humidity in the air, and the 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 moisture content is moving from one place to another place. And obviously, due to the high temperature, once the moisture goes up, it again gets dried down, and it transforms from water into vapor, and the vapor needs to cool down to become clouds. When the temperature is always rising at an elevated temperature, it is difficult for this the evaporated in humidity to form into clouds. So it stays as humidity in the atmosphere, thus causing more increase in the Earth's temperature. Loss of biodiversity. Obviously, the species which are used to staying at a certain degrees, certain temperatures, a slight change in those temperatures, especially for some sensitive species, it could be detrimental for them. Most of the world's endangered species, some 25% of the mammals and 12% of the birds, may become extinct over the next few decades as warmer conditions alerts the forests, wetlands, and alters our forest, wetlands, rangelands they depend on, and human development blocks them from migrating elsewhere. See, the migrating birds, they get confused when they fly across because there's a lot of radiation from mobile using cellular radiation. There's a lot of high-rise buildings bouncing off and hampering the natural tracking system they have. This migrating birds they have built into their brain. They have this tracker. They know how to get back to their uh, the migrating areas, the mating grounds, or where they look for food during winter season. These birds they have a built-in GPS. They know which direction to go. But as soon as there's radiation in the air, and there's when they will try to fly across over a country, over a city with very high rise buildings, they lose track of the GPS, and they tend to lose their destination and end up somewhere else where they cannot flourish, thus not be able to spread or hold on to their species, and slowly we are going to lose biodiversity as well. Increased diseases. High temperatures are expected to expand the range of some dangerous vector-borne diseases. Now, vector-borne diseases are diseases that come from mosquitoes or from the earth that's released into the ground, that's been trapped into the ground for many years, but they're being released slowly. Over hundreds of years, they've been trapped down now because of the global temperature rising in a few hundred years ago or a billion years ago, when the Earth's crust was all ice and there was only um, polar bears and other Arctic mammals or animals and bacteria and other living things were available. When they had died, their corpse, their remains got buried into the snow. Now, if it was buried in the ground, you all know that the ground will decompose the body within a certain period of time. Now, when the body was buried in snow, a lot of diseases that were affecting the population then, the animals, the mammals, or the living things were getting affected. All the bacteria and germs and viruses that were available at that time, a billion years ago, that got buried down deep into the ground into a thermophrost where it was covered with snow, hundreds of feet of snow for many years. Now, because of global warming, this snow is melting away, thus releasing all the viruses and bacteria and all unknown diseases in our environment. a world in altogether. It's the global warming not only increases the disease level, not only puts stress on our ecosystem, not only becomes a threat to biodiversity, it in general puts our world under stress. Ongoing environmentally damaging activities such as overgrazing. Now, because we are developing, we are also overgrazing because we have a lot more cattle. So we need to cut more, feed them more grass. We need more land for development. So we go for deforestation, where people are illegally cutting trees and emptying large vasts of the tropical forests because they need the wood, and then also they need the land for building structures. Also, denuded agricultural soil means that the nature will be more vulnerable than previously to change in climate. Because of the overuse of the topsoil, we make bricks out of the soil. We do cut down the trees that have been growing for many years, thus holding on to the biodiversity in the area. We cut down, uh, we alter the local environment, and then we build mega structures on there. These mega structures and everything affects the locality, affects the environment, affects the solar flux, affects how much light is getting reflected, affects the migrating birds from not being able to track their GPS signals. There is the overuse of soil. The topsoil means that when the weather pattern is going to change more and more in the days to come, when we try to develop our agriculture and try to climatize or sensitize with the new conditions, it will be far more difficult than it is now. Similarly, the world's vast human population, much of it poor, is vulnerable to climate stress. So far, still now, we have majority of our population, not only in this country, in the world in general, who are still living in vulnerable situations. And when these people, these poorer people, people who are less fortunate people, as a big section of these people are vulnerable because these people don't have any shelter. These people might be floaters. They might be staying on the streets. They might be staying homeless, and they might be dependent. A lot of people might be solely dependent on agricultural produce, which, due to the global warming, it will be directly affected. Thus, putting these vulnerable people into climatic stress. Millions live in dangerous places such as floodplains or in slums around the big cities of the developing world. If you see, for example, the Rohingya population from Myanmar fled to Bangladesh and made home on the hills of Kutupalong or and other hill tracts areas. Now, when there's a rain, these hills that they're just so heavily overcrowded and unplanned. They just went and started living on the hills in millions. Over 10 million people have crowded. Over a million people have crowded into Bangladesh, into the hills of Kutupalong and Chittagong hill tracts, Khagrachari and Bandarbon. And when there was a rain, the land started uh, giving off, and the lands on the side of the hill started slipping, and there was landslides. So poor people got affected again due to directly related to global warming and overheating of the Earth's temperature and severe climatic changes. Often there is nowhere else for this population to move. Like all these Rohingya people who got affected, got distressed, got relocated, and then they came and came to stay on the hills of Bangladesh, and they got relocated, affected by the rain in dangerous places. And also some people live in the floodplains. Like we see near the coastal area, a lot of the coastal areas breaking away into the rivers. But these people do live here because that's where all the place they have. They don't have nowhere else to go. Also, people living in the slums. We get so many fires these days. Just not always because of global warming, but some cases they are also related. around the big cities of developing world. In in our country, at least in the cities, around the cities, we every other day we see a fire in the slum or a fire in a building which has not been constructed with the proper um, health, fire and safety precautions. And these conditions, these millions of people who live under these dangerous conditions, and especially on developing cities as well. It's not only in the village. You'll see there's far less people who die from fire or um, an explosion or anything such as that in the village or in the rural area, because the people are not so congested and they're not so heavily dependent on gas, or they don't stay in close vicinity with a large number of people, and it's very difficult to control how much who use and what material they use and what chemicals and elements they use. That's also putting them in a higher risk. uh, and then when these kind of things happen, and these people who are already displaced and staying in poor conditions, they do not have anywhere else to go. In the distant past, man and his ancestors migrated in the response to climate to changes in habitat. See, in the past, when our forefathers moved from one place to another place, or even as migrating animals, when they move from one place to another place, is to adjust to the changes in habitat. Now, habitat changes take place due to changes in the weather conditions. If the weather condition is different, the habitat is going to change. If there's rain, there'll be water. There'll be a lot of greenery. There'll be trees, plants. If it's drought, if it's dry, there'll be sand and lack of water and lack of any kind of trees or plants, unless the ones which are used to growing in arid conditions in the desert. Now that was something our forefathers used to take into account and act accordingly, or move or relocate accordingly due to the changes in habitat. There will be much less room for migration in the future due to rising population, decreasing land area, and global warming, increasing the sea levels, thus causing a lot more flooding, a lot of islands, a lot of coastal areas disappearing from this planet's surface. And also, we already know there's only 1/4 of this Earth's surface is actually land, and the rest is all water. So, with the increasing population and decreasing land space, it's a very good possibility that in the future, when weather anomalies happen, this destitute or uh, people who are affected by these weather conditions, they will have no room for migration anywhere else.